Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Boleto and Frost.
Yeah, a very good morning from us. Let's get started.
The United States conducts what it calls self-defense strikes in southern Iran against the backdrop of ongoing peace talks.
A group of leading British doctors say social media is just as dangerous for young people as smoking.
Another record-breaking day of heat yesterday, but it's not over yet. Peaks of 35 degrees Celsius expected in London today.
Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for your company today. Our top story then, the United States has launched renewed strikes on Iran at a crunch time for the ongoing peace talks.
The US military says the strikes in the south of the country were in self-defense. A spokesperson for US Central Command, Captain Tim Hawkins, said the strikes were to protect our troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Targets included missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to emplace mines. US Central Command continues to defend our forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire.
Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has insisted the Strait of Hormuz must be opened one way or another.
What's happening there is unlawful, it's illegal, it's unsustainable for the world, it's unacceptable. I don't know of any country in the world that does it. The Russians are not in favor of a tolling system. The Chinese are not in favor of a tolling system. I mean, there's no country in the world that's in favor of a tolling system except the regime in Iran. So that's not acceptable. That cannot happen. The straits need to be open, unimpeded, without tolls.
Well, also this morning, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's about to step up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon.
The Israeli military hit over 70 targets in the south of the country yesterday, despite the existence of a ceasefire agreement. Here's what Netanyahu had to say on his social media.
We will hit them. It's true they're shooting drones at us. We have a special team working on that, and we'll solve that too. In the meantime, you're showing resilience. I want to bless the residents of the North's resilience that inspires all of us. But what this requires of us now is to increase the blows, to increase the intensity. We'll smite them with overwhelming force.
Well, Lebanese authorities have said Israeli strikes have killed more than 3,100 people since early March. Let's get a live report on all this. Sally joins us from Dubai. Sally, I guess 2 days ago or so, we were at as high as hopes that we've had for quite some time about the broader peace talks between the US and Iran. To what extent has that been tested now?
Good morning to you both, Will. I think the last 24 hours just underlines just how fragile this situation is when you look at the clashes in the Strait of Hormuz overnight. I heard fast jet activity in the air over the UAE here last night, and that usually means something's going on. And sure enough, soon after, we heard that the US forces had hit Iranian targets in the south of the country, acts of self-defense, according to US Central Command, who said that they targeted Iranian missile launch sites, as you said, and also Iranian attack boats that were apparently laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iranian state media came out to confirm that 4 members of the Revolutionary Guard were killed in those incidents. And they also said that blasts were heard in the port city of Bandar Abbas, which is in the very south of Iran, on the Strait of Hormuz. You can get a ferry there from the UAE in normal times. It's also home to a significant military base. And of course, all this happens in the backdrop of intense diplomatic efforts, which we've seen really take some sort of, focus over the last 48 hours or so. Donald Trump really talking up some prospect of a deal, only then to talk it down 24 hours later, saying, there's no need to rush. And certainly it doesn't feel like we're going to hear some sort of breakthrough anytime soon. The Iranians have said that they are reaching agreement on some of the conditions when it comes to this framework for another round of peace talks, but that some sort of deal is not going to be signed imminently. Now, the Iranian negotiating team are currently in Qatar, which is very interesting. Qatar has taken has stepped towards playing more of a mediatory role along with Pakistan in the last few weeks, which is really interesting because, of course, Qatar has been attacked for weeks during this war by Iran, but they're also holding billions of dollars of Iranian frozen assets. So very interesting that Qatar is also now involved in this mediation effort. But when you listen to both sides in terms of what the US is saying, Marco Rubio saying, that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be open one way or another, and that the negotiating language of the deal with Iran could take a few days, well, that certainly feels very far apart from what we're hearing from the Iranians. It feels like there's a lot of work to do. And at the same time, when you look at the situation in Lebanon, Benjamin Netanyahu saying that they're about to step up strikes when it comes to Hezbollah, having hit 70 Hezbollah targets reportedly in the last 24 hours, dozens more people killed. And the Iranians are saying, well, any deal is going to have to include a ceasefire and a cease in fighting in Lebanon, not just in Iran and the wider region. It feels like there are lots of things now that could really scupper any sort of diplomatic effort. And of course, you've got Donald Trump as well making what feels like more increasingly unrealistic demands, saying yesterday that he wanted other Arab nations to join the Abraham Accords, normalising diplomatic relations with Israel. Well, it feels like, all of this is very unrealistic when you look at the Iranian position. There's a lot of work to do.
Sally, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for that and this sort of back and forth in terms of optimism or pessimism around the peace deal, of course, has affected oil prices for what it's worth. Fell significantly late last week into the weekend, well below $100 for Brent crude. It's now up another couple of percent today, 98.3 the price of oil this morning, so rising 2% on those hopes kind of easing a little bit on the peace talks. But still, below 100, still a long way below where we were a week or two ago, but nonetheless rising again this morning.
We're going to move on now to some other news because a group of UK doctors are warning that social media could be having as bad an impact on young people's health as smoking.
It's a report from the Academy of Royal Colleges which pointed to multiple impacts that it's having on children. Well, Oliver's here with more on this. So what's triggered this and what exactly are they saying?
So it's all coming as the government's consultation into growing up in an online world closes this evening. And what these top doctors are warning of is a wave of radicalised children that could pose a real and potentially catastrophic risk to society, according to the quote that we've had from that group. They're saying that these addictive, often hateful and extreme videos that can be found online is making young people mimic them. So doctors are seeing injuries at least once a week of children who are coming in, they've injured themselves, either copying some of the videos that they've seen. In the worst cases, children also dying from these things, like where they've seen challenges online and they've pushed themselves far too far. Now we've had the former Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, also join the debate, and he's called for an Australia-style ban, like what we see down under, where under-16s are banned from social media. Of course, he didn't have such strong views when he was in government because he's not allowed to as part of collective agreement. But now he's saying that that is the route that the government should be taking. The government previously has obviously brought in the Online Safety Act, which allows the government to fine social media, online companies, if they're not protecting children. But there is calls from parents, from various people, including these top doctors, saying that the government needs to go further.
Consultation ends tonight. Do we have a timeline of how and when we'll know exactly what they do want to do next, long term?
So no timeline set out yet, but the government says so far 70,000 people have shared their views, and bereaved families are going to be going to Downing Street later on to meet with the Prime Minister, hand over a petition, because they clearly feel like the government hasn't done enough so far to protect young people. Quite interestingly, though, there is another group, a coalition of people who believe that actually bringing in a ban doesn't address the core issues here, that you can't just magic this away by bringing in a ban. You've got to go at the structural issues as to why you've got algorithms online that are promoting often the most eye-catching, the most shocking content, and then putting that in front of children to try and keep them on these sites for longer.
Yeah, and it's that addictive algorithm that parents are most worried about. It's such an interesting debate. We should hear by the end of the year the government say they want to come back with some firm action by the end of the year, which a lot of parents will be crying out for. Oliver, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Another big story today, the Education Secretary has confirmed she's pursuing reports of hidden extra charges in government-funded childcare. Rob's here to talk all about this. So if you're a parent, you'll know 30 hours free childcare is a big thing, but the reality of it isn't really landing with lots of families.
Yeah, this was a big Labour policy. It was something the Tories announced and said they would be bringing in as well. It came fully into action, I think, September last year. 30 hours of free childcare a week from 9 months right up to school age for working parents in a certain salary band. Anyway, the issue is that there's been reports of some parents basically, when they go to try and get their free place, finding that there are extra charges being thrown in. So, say, non-refundable deposits that are being charged by nurseries, or sort of top-up payments for things like, you know, food or creams or nappies and things
trips,
like that.
We had that with, like,
trips. Yeah, or sometimes a requirement that if you want to take your 30 hours, you have to pay for extra childcare on top of that and essentially pay privately for that. And the government say the worry is that that still means that the childcare is unaffordable and inaccessible for people. So the Education Secretary has asked the Competition and Markets Authority to look into this. The reply you usually get from the childcare sector, they say the justification for these charges is because the sector's been grossly underfunded for years and years and years, and that the money that they get from the government per hour, if they just did the free places for parents, it wouldn't be commercially viable, basically. So that's why they have to have this sort of cross-subsidy, if you like, to kind of top it up to make sure that they can actually keep the business ticking over.
Yeah, and often what you'll find is small childcare providers, they simply can't stay open. And so lots of closing, therefore parents trying to search for a place for their children becomes even harder. So it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and what the childcare providers have been saying is that, great, if you're going to have a review, but have a review as well about the sort of broader funding streams and about whether the actual system in place from government to fund these free hours is enough to run a sustainable childcare industry and run nurseries sustainably and viably like that.
Rob, Christoph, thanks so much. There's some awful news amid the ongoing heat wave, and the body of a 15-year-old has been recovered from a lake in Lincoln.
Yeah, Declan Sawyer died after getting into difficulty after entering Swanholme Lakes. This was Sunday afternoon. In a statement, Declan's father said they would like to raise awareness about children playing near rivers or lakes.
Water companies have been warning about the risk of cold water shock, as many large bodies of water are still sitting at winter temperatures.
Yeah, expect another potentially record-breaking day of heat today. Yesterday was the hottest May day on record as temperatures hit 34.8 degrees in Heathrow.
Our science editor, Tom Clark, explains the science behind what's going on.
Whether you were basking on the beach in Brighton or broiling on London's Blackheath, this was a May bank holiday to remember. But temperature records come and go, so why should this one be described as historic? Well, new May high of 34.8 degrees at London's Kew Gardens didn't just break the previous record, it smashed it. 2 degrees warmer than the 32.8 degrees recorded back in May 1944. It's also the hottest bank holiday on record, which, given there's one in August, says perhaps more about the British weather than about the inexorable rise of global temperatures. May heatwaves are rare, but we're definitely in one. Take a look at this temperature anomaly map, showing how different temperatures are to the average. The areas in pink up to 15 degrees warmer than normal. What's causing it? Well, the meteorological pressure cooker effect known as a heat dome. Warm air moving up from North Africa, becoming trapped under an area of high pressure across Western Europe. It acts like a lid over the continent, squeezing down on the air close to the surface, increasing temperatures and stopping it from escaping. Glorious weather for many after a decidedly chilly start to the month, but not for everyone. It's why health officials issued yellow and amber heat alerts for the coming days. Combine this heat with below average rainfall in many places and it may have wider impacts too.
if we think about our crops, our farmers trying to grow those crops, they're really going to be struggling too. They haven't had the water input they need, and this can really be a problem thinking about having that harvest later in the summer. There could be some really big problems with failed harvests.
And yes, I might sound like a broken record, but this record-breaking May fits precisely the predictions climate scientists have been making for years. Average spring temperatures rising in recent decades, with the 3 warmest springs on record all occurring since 2017 in a series that dates back to 1884. A recent study concluding in a natural climate not impacted by greenhouse gas emissions, breaching the 32.8 May record would have been a 1 in 100-year event. Now it's a 1 in 33-year event. Rare enough to mean sun worshipping will still play a part in our future, but a reminder that adapting homes, infrastructure and food supplies to new extremes of heat is no longer up for debate. Tom Clark, Sky News.
So this is Just Kew Gardens Live, and just to bring you up to date on the numbers, a UK record for the highest daily minimum temperature for May was set overnight as the temperature didn't fall below 21.3 Celsius. This is overnight at Kenley Airfield in South London, making it officially a tropical night. This is according to the Met Office.
It's going to be another hot day today. Right, time to speak to the government. Delighted to say that joining us now is the Labour Party Chair, Anna Turley. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Talk to us about the scale of wrongdoing you think is going on in the childcare sector that you've been talking about.
Well, approximately 3/4 of parents have said to us that they've been really shocked by some of the additional add-on costs that they've seen coming through when they've accessed nursery places. So that could be things like putting down a hefty deposit, could be admin fees, could be the cost of little extras like sort of lunches, nappies and so on, some of which have really escalated. And so parents have been coming to us as the government saying, look, we want to access this, but it's still really prohibitive. And while it's a huge investment for us as a government, we've put in £9.5 billion into supporting childcare, which should make, hopefully, families £8,000 a year better off. But we want to make sure that that money is going right to the parents that they need it and they're not being caught by a swathe of extra additional hidden costs.
Is this, in your eyes, excessive rule-breaking or law-breaking by childcare providers, or is it sort of understandable given a lot of cost pressures that they'll be facing themselves?
I think, of course, there are cost pressures, but it's really important that we are prioritising the families and the children who need this. And that's why this isn't the government itself, you know, telling these companies what to do. We're asking the Competition Markets Authority to take an independent assessment to make sure that the system is fair, that parents are able to access the support that they need, and that there's not some price gouging and some unfair activity happening here. It's really important that we get all the evidence to understand what's happening here. I
wanted to get your take on the rape case recently that saw 3 teenage boys being spared custodial sentences for the rape of 2 teenage girls. Giselle Pellico has been speaking to broadcasters this morning and said she's deeply shocked that they didn't face a custodial sentence. Are you as shocked as well? I was shocked, but obviously I know it's gone back to the Attorney-General to make an assessment now, and I think that's absolutely right. I'm not going to preempt his decision or make any judgment on that, but I think anyone watching that and seeing the evidence and hearing the horrendous story of the victims be absolutely devastated. It's really shocking, and I think, you know, for those young women to go through that experience in the first place is horrendous. But they were so brave in coming forward to the justice system to tell their stories again, to go through that process. It's vital that the system works for those victims, that it supports them, and that it ultimately gives them the justice that is deserved, and that they feel that they've got some kind of justice for what happened to them. When will the Attorney-General be reporting back on this? Well,
as I understand, I think there's 28 days within which he'll make a decision, but I know it's a huge priority for him, and I know he'll be looking at it carefully. And what we want to do is just make sure that the right decision is made.
On social media, the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges has warned of the damage that social media and smartphones in particular are doing on children. Of course, it comes as your consultation on this comes to an end today. When you hear it from the medical profession as explicitly from that, does it shake you into wanting to bring in a ban sooner rather than later?
I think it's such a huge priority for this government. We saw government action very quickly when Grok was doing some horrendous images of children on X. So we know that we can take action very swiftly when we need to. So I'm pleased the consultation is closing today. The Prime Minister is bringing in some of the families who've experienced trauma through their children's access to social media into Downing Street today, because it's so important that we hear from those who've been affected by some of the dangers that social media bring. We've had a very powerful consultation for children, for families, for parents, carers, schools across the country. We've gathered a huge amount of evidence, and I think it's really important that we listen to that now, we absorb it and we take urgent action, because it's very, very clear that social media is providing a huge amount of, yes, opportunities, but also some dangers for society as well.
A ban for under-16s is likely at this point? By when?
Everything's on the table. We're not ruling anything out. And I spoke to some young people in my constituency last week, and some of them were very supportive of a ban. Some of them really wanted these protections to come in. They were very thoughtful and very nuanced about the impacts of social media. But as I said, both the opportunities it gave them to connect with people, but the impact on them on things like bullying online, body image, and some of the content and material that they were accessing that they knew they shouldn't be, and how the algorithms were taking them on some journeys that they didn't want to go on. So young people know themselves this is something they're worried about. So I think it's absolutely right the government steps in and takes some urgent action.
I wanted to ask you about the upcoming Makerfield by-election. As party chair, do you look at it as a sort of unnecessary nuisance for the party and for the country?
Well, we are where we are. We've got a by-election now, and it's a really important decision there for the people of Makerfield to choose their next Member of Parliament. They've got a fantastic representative candidate there in Andy Burnham. He's a great guy. He's got a strong track record of delivery, not just in Manchester, but down in Parliament previously as well. So I'm really looking forward to getting out in the next few days to go out and campaign for him. I hope the weather's as good as it is down here today. And, yeah, it's an important election for the people of Makerfield, and we're looking forward to having another Labour MP back down here in Westminster.
Is it unnecessary?
Look, I think, you know, we are where we are. The reality is Josh Simons has made his decision to step down. It's a shame, it's a disappointment. I thought he was a good representative. And the decision now is for the people of Makerfield. We respect their decision. They have the choice of candidates in front of them. But as I said, it's a really important election, particularly when you look at the candidates. The Reform candidate who is coming out with some horrendous misogyny, sexism, some really vile comments on social media. Or you've got someone like Andy Burnham with a terrific track record of delivery, who is a local lad who really cares about the community there and is going to be a brilliant representative for them.
Are you, as chair, ready for potentially, therefore, an upcoming mayoral race for the rest of Greater Manchester to follow?
One step at a time. We'll deal with that when we come to it. The priority now is to get a brilliant Labour MP for Makerfield, and I'm really looking forward to getting up there and supporting Andy Burnham.
It must be all a bit of a nuisance for you, though, to have to prepare for all of this. You said it was a disappointment that you know, it was triggered in the first place?
Well, of course, because we're focused on getting on with the priorities the British people want us to do. I've just been across the country in the last set of local elections, listening to people on the doorsteps. They want us to focus on the cost of living, which is as what we're doing with our announcements today on childcare. We've had a really good week where we've had the highest growth in the G7. We've, you know, got inflation coming down. There's obviously important international issues. We're in a very sort of delicate position internationally. There's a huge amount of priorities for the government. And, of course, I want us to be focusing on those. But as I said, the people of Makerfield now have an opportunity to represent a brilliant candidate to send back down to Westminster to be part of our team.
Obviously, multiple candidates are available. We're showing those names now on the screen for the by-election coming on the 18th of June. Just moving on from this topic, but linked to it, if there were a change of leader off the back of all of this for the government, do you think it could potentially trigger a general election in the months ahead? Is that something, as chair, that you're at least contingency planning for?
I'm afraid I'm taking one step at a time. The priority for me is to get Andy Burnham down here to join our team in Parliament in Westminster. As I said, he'll be a brilliant MP for Makerfield. We've got a Prime Minister who's doing a cracking job, particularly at the moment, with, say, where we've got really unstable international concerns. We've got a calm Prime Minister who's getting on with the job. We've got a Cabinet who are delivering on the cost of living, bringing NHS waiting lists down. I said inflation coming down, highest growth in the G7. We're a government that's focused on delivery, and that's the priority for us.
Just finally, on Iran, you mentioned the international situation. Are you worried that these latest military salvos over the last 24 hours completely derail the more optimistic tone towards peace talks that we'd had on the prior couple of days?
Well, I think we have to keep positive and keep focused on the ceasefire. The most important thing for us is de-escalating. This was not our war. We did not choose this. The important priority for us is to help play our role in de-escalating and making sure we're protecting people from the impacts of the war on their cost of living. The priority for us is maintaining a proper ceasefire and opening the Strait of Hormuz to limit the damage for the British people.
Anatoly, thanks for joining us this morning. Good to see you.
Thanks, Helen.
The chair of the Labour Party there.
Now, it's not long until millions of football fans flock to Mexico for the World Cup. One of the biggest challenges facing authorities is security.
The country has sunk tens of millions of pounds into ensuring safety at the Games. But that fact risks being overshadowed by the spectre of Mexico's drug cartels.
Our US correspondent Martha Kellner joined a group of families desperately searching for their loved ones who say they've disappeared at the hands of these criminal gangs. And just a warning, her report contains the moment they discover the remains of one person who had been taken.
Guadalajara is getting a facelift. Mexico's second city is preparing to host 4 World Cup games. Security is being stepped up. Excitement is building. But there's a darker side to this place.
Sadly, all those images are representing missing people here in Guadalajara.
Across the city, there's a seemingly endless catalogue of faces. Some of the more than 16,000 people who have disappeared from the wider Jalisco state area. Many of them, it's thought, have been murdered by cartels. But the families of the missing say they've been abandoned by the authorities. I'm in the hills above Guadalajara with 11 women from a group known as Guerreros Buscadores, or warrior searchers, and they're digging for graves.
Maribel is on the phone at the moment to the person who gave them the tip to come to this area. She's trying to find where exactly they discovered what they thought might be bones.
They wear the faces of their loved ones. Some have done searches like this dozens, even hundreds of times. In relentless heat, without machinery, it's back-breaking and unbelievably bleak work, driven by desperation. After an hour of searching, the women think they might have a breakthrough. It's here, she says.
All the women have rushed over to this specific area. That's because the tip that they received was from someone who said that they thought there might be a bag underneath a large rock in this area. And so they're attacking it with picks and shovels and their hands.
First, they find a bone. And then... I think that's a head, she says. I think it's a head. He still has hair, says another. They uncover an entire skeleton wrapped in plastic. It's buried alongside registration plates, a car key and an empty wallet.
There's a really strange contradiction of emotions here because these women are looking for bodies and they believe they've found one. But they also know that, you know, while this might not be their missing loved one, it is someone's family member.
Sandra, who's been looking for her son for 7 years, has to turn away. As one searcher breaks the ground, another urges the women to say a prayer. The group gather in a circle, among them Lupita, who's looking for her 5 children. Her daughter went missing first, then her 4 sons.
Those 4 were taken all at once at the same time, in the same day. They disappeared on December 19, 2019. Lucerito, my daughter, disappeared first on a highway on June 6, 2016. I've been looking for her for 10 years, but I haven't given up hope on bringing her back home. It's a mixed bag of emotions. I feel a lot of anxiety. We came here full of hope, but we also don't want to find them here. It is terrible.
This is a brave endeavour too. By conducting these searches, the women risk retribution from the cartels. Across Mexico, a number of women have been killed for doing just this. They call the police to tell them about the body they've found. 2 hours later, officers arrive. They promise they will investigate. Is this a problem for people coming to the World Cup?
No, ninguna.
No, none. There's no problem about this, he says. They don't have to worry about this? About cartels? Like what, he asks. No, not at all.
Ninguno.
Violence erupted in Mexico in February after a notorious cartel boss was killed by the military near Guadalajara. Some called for the city to be stripped of its World Cup games. Now there's a show of force to project a sense of safety and order. Local authorities in Mexico have spent $55 million on security and surveillance for this World Cup. They'll be using drones,
attention, please exit the area immediately,
robots and Black Hawk helicopters. The head of the police force, which includes the stadium, shows me where they'll be monitoring fans.
One of the things that our mayor has made sure of is guaranteeing the safety of all the people who come.
What would you say to the families of missing people who are searching for the bodies of their own loved ones and feel that they're not a priority here?
Actually, there are different issues. There are various state agencies that receive reports from the searching mothers regarding where they believe their missing loved ones might be. Although they are acting outside the law, they are still assisted and their cases are followed up on. As a municipal authority, we can only support these efforts by working to prevent these crimes.
His words ring hollow for Maribel. Her brother Jose, who has 5 children, is missing. All she knows is that he was taken by people in a pickup truck. For 5 years, she searched for answers without any help from authorities.
There is so much money being spent on policing this World Cup, yet you are going out quite literally with picks and shovels on your own to try and find your missing family members. How does that make you feel?
The authorities are worrying too much about the safety of the foreigners, of people who come to the World Cup, but they are not thinking about the security of us, their relatives. That we expose ourselves a lot in each search, we risk our lives. We don't have the support from any institution.
Money that Maribel would have spent on her 4-year-old daughter instead goes to looking for her brother. The World Cup, with all its trappings, will take place a short drive from here. It feels a world away. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Guadalajara, Mexico.
Yeah, important reporting there from Martha Kellner. It's on the Sky News website. Do take a look. Still to come on mornings on Sky News. The United States has launched renewed strikes on Iran. We'll be speaking to our security and defence editor, Michael Clark, after the break.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. Let's return to the top story, the Iran war, where the United States launched renewed strikes on Iran, on southern Iran in particular, strikes they framed as defensive. Let's talk about it all with our defence and security editor, Michael Clark. Michael, good morning, as always. Yeah. Are these legitimately framed as defensive one-off strikes, or are they significantly renewal of the military activity?
Well, they don't have to do them. I mean, you can claim that anything is defensive. I mean, there were some strikes against, they said, were missile sites being constructed or renewed in Bandar Abbas, in Sirik and Jask in the south. And you could say, well, if these are missile sites getting ready to go, then they would threaten our troops. But the troops, remember, the ones who are at sea are almost 500 miles away. They're a long way out to sea for safety reasons. It could be that somebody speculated that maybe they were turning their radars on, which would be their air defence radars, to prevent American aircraft safely monitoring what was going on in the Straits. That's possible. And then there were some strikes against, they said, a couple of boats that were laying mines in the Straits, which is entirely plausible. Is that defensive? Well, you can interpret that. But the point is that the Americans didn't have to do this. All of those things that they're doing could be regarded as precautionary attacks, but they've chosen to do it now, presumably, as a signal to the Iranians that they will renew the offensive if these talks don't go anywhere.
And then overnight, Marco Rubio saying, you know, the Strait of Hormuz has to be open. They're going to open it one way or another. What do you read into that type of language?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the war is now all about. I mean, opening the Straits would now look like a good outcome, whatever else happens to nuclear issues and ballistic missiles and the future of the Iranian regime. Opening the Straits, because that's what's doing the damage to the world economy and indirectly to Trump himself. The US suffers less from the Strait of Hormuz than everybody else, but it still suffers with oil prices and the threat of a global recession that it's creating. So what the Americans are saying, yes, we will open the Straits. The point is they could open the Straits if they're prepared to fight for them. If they move their forces in, they've got 2 carrier strike groups, 2 Marine expeditionary units there. I was checking out yesterday, they've got 32 major warships in the area, no fewer than 18 destroyers, 2 carriers, you know, landing assault ships. They've got a lot of things there. They could move into the Straits if they wanted and fight it and open the Straits. But if they did that, old-fashioned warfare, they would put themselves in danger and they'd take some losses. And the view is that President Trump can't tolerate the idea of losses because everything has to be with little or no military loss. So the Americans are trying to finagle the Straits open with 6th-generation warfare, doing it all with drones and surveillance and air power at a distance. And, of course, it doesn't really work. I mean, the Straits on that basis will only open with a diplomatic solution, and that's what they're struggling to try to find.
What's your take, Michael, as to whether the great optimism that kind of suddenly came in Thursday, Friday, Saturday last week towards the peace talks was completely unfounded, or was it legitimate?
No, it's partly legitimate because the talks are going on. And yesterday in Doha, Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, and Arachi, Arachi is the Foreign Minister, Hemeti, who's the central bank governor in Iran, they were all in Doha talking about the details of unfreezing Iranian assets and sanctions relief. So they're dealing with quite a lot of details. Quite a lot of details are being discussed, we believe, with the IAEA on doing something about the highly enriched uranium. So lots of details are being discussed. But the fundamentals, which is, are you going to reopen the straits and then talk about nuclear issues, which basically puts everything back to where it was before the war and makes the war look pointless, but at least it would be over. That's what Trump is grappling with. And he's taking a lot of heat from his own Republicans to say, if that's the best you can do, why did we fight in the first place? And that's his problem. If he goes for this deal, it will look as if the war was meaningless.
Michael, as always, thanks so much. More with Michael next hour.
Now, Sky History premieres its new World War II documentary tonight. Let's take a look.
For 6 dark years, the world was on fire. Cities were demolished and whole populations threatened. When would the war end? No one knew. How would it end? No one knew. Life.
That was, of course, Tom Hanks, who is no stranger to a war drama. He's narrating this particular documentary, and military historian Saul David is one of the contributors. He joins us now. Saul, great to have you with us. Talk us through the sort of background of this particular doc, which is, I mean, as high profile as they come.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to remember The World at War, made in the early 1970s, and that was voiced by another famous thespian, I suppose you could call him, Sir Laurence Olivier. And this is far and away the most ambitious project since then. And in some ways, it's really needed, because although The World at War had wonderful footage, it also had a lot of the participants involved. What it didn't have is the history, in the sense that the scholarship hadn't properly been done. A lot of papers hadn't been released. We hadn't seen into the Soviet archives. We didn't know about Enigma. There was an awful lot we didn't know. And so we've been waiting, historians, myself included, for a project on this scope that would allow the war to be told for a modern audience.
And so that is done by Tom Hanks. Why do you think audiences trust him so well with telling war stories?
Well, he's genuinely interested. I mean, he's got a family connection to the Second World War, as indeed most of us do. It's fascinating. When I was actually working on the project, I was talking about this story of Tunisia, Operation Torch, and I discovered a picture in my family home. In fact, I'm in the home at the moment, my grandfather's old home, of my grandfather on the beach at Operation Torch. And he was a Royal Navy officer. I didn't know why he was there until I started digging down into the story. And I think that family connection, which a lot of us have, and Tom Hanks certainly has. It's not, he's not just doing it for the money. He's not just doing it because it is the greatest conflict in the history of the world. He's doing it because he has an emotional connection. And I think one of the things this series does so well is bring out the human stories. It brings out this sort of the personal link of us and our forebears, and why the war in the end, unfortunately, was worth fighting.
You mentioned an emotional connection there. I guess one of the things that comes up a lot with World War II now is, as more time passes, fewer people have that deep emotional connection. Is that an important factor as to why this project is necessary? And linked to that, I look at it and I see it's 20 episodes, or more than 20 episodes, which I can't wait to watch. But is there a risk that it misses the aim, if the aim is indeed that, to raise awareness of how important it all was, by being so long and detailed?
No, I don't think so. I think what we've been looking for is something that tells the war in the round. I mean, the problem with historians, myself included, is we tend to focus particularly on the war front. But what you've got in this series is the home front. You've got intelligence. You've got, of course, the Holocaust. I mean, all the different aspects, and a lot of the theaters of the war that have never been properly covered for an Anglophile audience, like, for example, the Far East, the fighting in China, for example. I mean, a lot of these neglected theaters are brought to the fore in this series. So it is truly a global conflict. But what we're really getting from this series, I think, is an understanding of the resonance of war, the consequences of war, and the dangers of not standing up to aggressors. We can see in modern times, if you allow an aggressor country to nibble away at territory, it's simply going to want to come back for more. And of course, I'm thinking about Russia and Ukraine, first of all, taking Crimea, then moving into the Donbass, and then finally a full-scale invasion. Why? Because they were appeased. And it reminds me, frankly, of the appeasement against Hitler in the 1930s, which is covered in episode 1 of the series. So, no, I do think it was necessary, and particularly for a younger generation. My own children don't necessarily read all of my history books, but they are interested in the world today and how we've got to the place we are and why we've got these global conflicts in the Middle East and also in Europe. And I think this 20-part series helps to explain a lot of that.
Saul, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And the new series out tonight on Sky.
Well, still to come here on Mornings on Sky News, how new AI models are posing a greater threat to global cybersecurity than ever before.
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
Are these immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Welcome back. There's a big problem with AI and it needs fixing fast. Well, Sky News has seen data that shows the latest chatbots are getting too good at hacking.
Yeah, that's right. At the rate at which they're improving is growing exponentially. And our technology correspondent, Roland Manthorpe, explains exactly what that means.
No pressure, but I think we have about 6 to 12 months to patch a gigantic chunk of software or face some really serious consequences. And the reason, of course, is this. The new AI models being released by companies like Anthropic, most notably Mythos. Sure you've heard of Mythos, right? It's the model that Anthropic said was so powerful they couldn't actually release it. And honestly, you know, when I heard that, I was actually a bit sceptical. I wasn't sure they provided the evidence to really back that up. But since that moment happened, about 6 weeks ago, new data has started to come out, which, honestly, it shows that this stuff is extremely real. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So let's start here. This is from Mozilla, the makers of Firefox, the browser. And it shows their monthly bug fixes going back about a year and a half. And you can see, for a long time, Mozilla have been fixing about roughly 30 bugs a month. Every month they do the same. And then, in February, something started really to be really exciting for them. They started to use AI. Look, they got from here up to 76 that month. And then, through Anthropic, they got access to Mythos. And this was how many bug fixes they completed. This is the gap between what we had before and Mythos. This is the jumping capability. And yeah, look, sure, this is just one company, and also numbers of bug fixes. It's not always the best measure because, not all bug fixes are equal, right? Some can be quite small and some can be really big. But we're also getting independent assessments, which roughly show the same thing. So this is a graph from the AI Security Institute based here in London. I think probably the world's leading AI security institute. And it shows the results on their cyber assault course, which simulates the takeover of a company. It's rather ominously called the last ones. I don't know why. And you can see, so back here, Claude Sonnet 3.7, that was released in January 2025. And at that point, AI could complete the initial reconnaissance of a network. It could get in and have a look around, snoop around, but that was really it. By the time Mythos came out, it was up to step 22 on average. And it could do privilege escalation. It could get inside the network and then work its way up, getting more and more privileges to attack the network. But now, this is the important point here, right? This was the moment of the Mythos panic. Suddenly, everyone began to think about banks and national security. There was a big worry about it. But I want to show you what has happened since, which is much less talked about. These are the results on the AI Security Institute test of the models that have been released since Mythos. You can see, OpenAI released GPT 5.5 and GPT 5.5 Cyber. Yeah, I know the names in here are a complete nightmare, but these are the OpenAI models. And also, even more confusingly, Anthropic released a new version of Mythos. But the names aren't the point. The point is the results. Because the last one's test only has 32 steps. And on their best attempt, the best models can now take over the network. That simply wasn't possible before. And 2 points here, right? The first is that this isn't really about Mythos. The OpenAI model does just as well here. This is about the overall progress of AI in cyber. And the second point, of course, as you can tell, this progress is moving really, really fast. So, of course, look, the people in AI are extremely, extremely aware of this, and they're taking steps to protect it. Anthropic have their Project Glasswing, where they only give out Mythos to certain select institutions like banks, and OpenAI have a similar thing, and there might be government versions in the future. But this is the problem, right? The US models you can keep tightly locked down, but there's another set of models, open weight or open source models. These days mainly come out of China. And as the name suggests, they're open. You can download them, you can run them on your computer, and they'll do whatever you want. And people have been tracking the progress of these models. You can see here, these are results from Casey, who are the American version of the AI Security Institute. And what they find consistently is that the Chinese models, which are on the orange line, are always tracking the American models. They're just a bit behind. And Casey reckon the gap is about 8 months. Basically, what that means is that 8 months after the American models achieve something, the Chinese models have it. And if the Chinese models have it, anyone can have it. And if anyone can have it, then cyber criminals can have it. So that's what we're dealing with here. The clock is ticking. We've got 8 months. Or at least we think we do. Because there aren't really good measurements of this sort of thing. You know, we don't really have good tests of intelligence for this kind of stuff. So we think the gap might be 8 months, but it could be a lot smaller. These are measurements by the Stanford AI Index. They reckon that the Chinese models, the open source models, are roughly equivalent to the American models right now. So maybe we could be seeing open source models with Mythos-level capabilities in 2 or 3 months. Like I say, we don't know for sure what's going on, but definitely the clock is ticking. And what happens when the clock stops? Well, I think I want to show you here how significant cyber attacks already are to the UK economy. They're a big drain. So in 2025, it was estimated that cyber attacks cost the UK economy £14.7 billion. That's actually 0.5% of GDP. And to put that number in context, I've put it next to the expenditure of different government departments. Ministry of Justice, prisons, FCDO, that's diplomacy, DEFRA, farms, DCMS, the digital department. Cyber attacks already exceed or are comparable to the expenditure of most of our major departments. And this was pre-AI. What happens if this doubles or triples? What happens if it's times by 10? And you know, one thing that I actually think that the Mythos panic slightly got wrong was that it was really focused on financial institutions and national security. And actually, those are probably the organisations that, with the help of AI, can harden themselves to this kind of attack. I think it's much more likely that AI will end up attacking the soft underbelly of society. And really, that kind of means all the services that we use every day. Hospitals, GPs, schools, all the services that you've probably heard about getting hit by ransomware, but maybe now they'll be hit even more frequently. And the good news is that we can defend against this stuff. It is possible to patch software, especially now we have AI. But are we going to? And are we going to respond with the speed we need to? Personally, I think that AI will end up being amazing for cybersecurity. We will finally be able to have something we've never had ever before, which is truly secure software. But that's the long term. And you know, the short term matters too. And are we going to do enough to protect ourselves in that time frame?
Yeah, Roland Manthorpe posing some important questions there around AI. But the Pope has become the latest world leader to warn about the dangers of AI, Wilf, essentially saying that governments need to slow down to, you know, end unending wars, essentially. It's going down the wrong path.
Yeah, saying there should be a big global sort of legal structure around it. We're out of time for this hour, but we'll be back after this.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Hello, good morning. It's 8 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Boleto and Frost.
With Leah and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well.
The United States conducts what it calls self-defense strikes in southern Iran against the backdrop of ongoing peace talks.
A group of leading British doctors say social media is just as dangerous for young people as smoking.
Another record-breaking day of heat yesterday, but it's not yet over. Peaks of 35 degrees expected in London.
Also, we've been looking at the potential tidal wave of cyber attacks that could come from rapidly improving AI systems.
Mexico faces a missing persons crisis. We speak to the women taking matters into their own hands to find their loved ones.
Of course, there's been a heat wave over the last few days, and we've got some sad breaking news to bring you to start off the show. And that is that at 3:18 p.m. yesterday, police were called to Leadbeater Dam in Halifax to reports that a teenage boy was in difficulty in the water. And a 13-year-old boy was pulled from the water. He was taken to hospital, but sadly pronounced dead at the scene. Sadly, not the first instance of this type over the weekend.
Yeah, that's right. All occurred, what Wolf was talking about, in Halifax in West Yorkshire. And of course, it comes after the body of a 15-year-old was recovered from a lake. This was in Lincoln, and his name was Declan Sawyer. He died after getting into difficulty entering Swanholme Lakes on Sunday afternoon. We have heard from Declan's family. They released a statement, and they've said they really want to raise awareness about children playing near rivers and lakes.
Water companies have been warning about the risk of cold water shock, as many large bodies of water are still sitting at winter temperatures, despite the very hot external temperatures over the course of the weekend, which, of course, expected to continue today. So that's sad breaking news at the top of the hour that a 13-year-old boy was pronounced dead on reaching hospital yesterday afternoon, having been pulled from Leadbeater Dam in West Yorkshire yesterday. Now, to the other top story of the day, the United States has launched renewed strikes on Iran at a crunch time for the ongoing peace talks.
The US military says the strikes in the south of the country were in self-defence. Well, a spokesperson from US CENTCOM, that's Captain Tim Hawkins, he said the strikes were to, in his words, protect our troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Targets, he says, included missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to emplace mines. US Central Command continues to defend our forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire.
Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has insisted the Strait of Hormuz must be opened one way or another.
What's happening there is unlawful, it's illegal, it's unsustainable for the world, it's unacceptable. I don't know of any country in the world that does it. The Russians are not in favor of a tolling system. The Chinese are not in favor of a tolling system. I mean, there's no country in the world that's in favor of a tolling system except the regime in Iran. So that's not acceptable. That cannot happen. The straits need to be open, unimpeded, without tolls.
Well, also this morning, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's about to step up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon.
The Israeli military hit over 70 targets in the south of the country yesterday, despite the existence of a ceasefire agreement. Here's what Netanyahu had to say on his social media.
We will hit them. It's true they're shooting drones at us. We have a special team working on that, and we'll solve that too. In the meantime, you're showing resilience. I want to bless the residents of the North's resilience that inspires all of us. But what this requires of us now is to increase the blows, to increase the intensity. We'll smite them with overwhelming force.
Well, Lebanese authorities say Israeli strikes have killed more than 3,100 people since early March. Let's talk all about this with Sally Lockwood, who's in Dubai for us. Morning to you, Sally. So first of all, help us understand the latest strikes in the region. Much more tension than we've been expecting in the last few weeks or so. How have people been reacting?
Yes, certainly. There's always concern in this region when we see any sort of flare-up during the ceasefire, and certainly what we've seen in the last 24 hours really does underline just how fragile things are. I heard a lot of fast jet activity overhead last night, which normally means something's going on. It's a little over a week since the UAE itself was attacked, and certainly we heard shortly after that fast jet activity that it was another clash in the Strait of Hormuz. US Central Command coming out and saying that they had attacked missile launch sites in the south of the country and boats that were reportedly laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz as an act of self-defense to protect their troops. Iranian media then said that they'd lost 4 members of the Revolutionary Guard in those attacks, and said that there had been blasts heard in the port city of Bandar Abbas, which is on the Strait of Hormuz. You can get a ferry there in normal times from the UAE. And of course, all of this latest flare-up in the Strait of Hormuz is happening at the same time as intense diplomatic efforts are underway. So these sorts of incidents really do dramatically raise the stakes of any sort of miscalculation or the ceasefire potentially collapsing at a moment where we're potentially seeing the most diplomatic progress we've seen so far in this war.
Does it kind of derail the diplomatic efforts that clearly there were quite high hopes about in recent days?
Yeah, that's right. I don't think it's derailed anything, but I think it certainly adds an immense amount of pressure to what is already a very delicate situation. As you say, there's been significant progress in the last few days. Donald Trump talking up some sort of potential breakthrough, saying it was imminent, and then talking it down just 24 hours later. But certainly diplomatic efforts are very much alive. The Iranian negotiating team are currently in Qatar, which has interestingly taken more of a mediation role in the last few weeks, despite being attacked themselves by Iran during this war. But there are so many issues that you can see the Iranians and the US are still very far apart on, not least the Strait of Hormuz, which Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said needs to be reopened one way or another, and that it could just take a few days for the language of the negotiating deal to be finalized. Well, if you listen to the Iranians, they're making no suggestion that there's going to be any sort of imminent deal, but they have confirmed that certainly they are in talks, and they are not going to be willing to give up their most powerful bargaining chip in the Strait of Hormuz easily. And then there's the issue of Lebanon. Iran has also said, look, any agreement needs to be an agreement of a cease and fire on all fronts, including Lebanon. And this comes at the same time that Benjamin Netanyahu has said Israel is going to step up their attacks on Hezbollah. In the last 24 hours, dozens more have been killed in Lebanon following Israeli strikes. So that also threatens to derail any sort of diplomatic process. And lastly, Donald Trump has thrown in another wild card, saying that any deal needs to also include a requirement of other Arab nations to join the Abraham Accords, which the UAE joined in 2020, normalizing diplomatic relations with Israel. It seems that Donald Trump is now trying to link what is already a very complicated Iran deal with a broader reshaping of the Middle East. Not only does that feel unrealistic, it also really threatens to overload an already very delicate diplomatic process.
Sally, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Now, a group of the UK's top doctors, they're warning that social media could be as bad as smoking for young people, their health.
It's a report from the Academy of Royal Colleges, which pointed to multiple impacts that it's having on kids. Oliver's here to talk us through a little bit more of the detail of this letter and exactly why it's coming now.
So the reason it's coming now is because there is a government consultation looking into growing up online in the online age. That closes at midnight tonight. So far, 70,000 people have given their views on what's happening. But this is just the latest in a row of experts who've come forward to warn about the dangers of what can happen when young minds are left free on the internet, where there are these quite violent videos that you can find, especially when young people have got such impressionable minds. We're seeing young people, according to these doctors, on at least once a week coming for treatment, either for mental health issues or for their physical health, where they've tried to mimic some of these acts that they're seeing online. And in some cases where there's been challenges that have been set, there's been children that have died as a result of this. So the warning is that social media can be as dangerous as smoking. And we're hearing from the former Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, that he would like to see an Australia-style ban brought in by the government for social media for the under-16s.
Yeah, the government would have been watching closely that Australia-style ban, but, you know, the critics argue it was an easy fix for something that so many parents were concerned about.
Yeah, and the flip side of the argument is how effective is it really going to be? Could there be ways around it? One of the big problems is, as you say, algorithms. You know, these bits of software that dictate what videos you see, how prominent they are. It's all in a way to sort of drive engagement and to keep you on there. And a lot of the times, the best performing videos are the most shocking ones, the most gory ones. And those are the ones that can cause the most damage to these young people.
OK, Ollie, thanks so much.
Time to talk about all of the day's politics. We're going to be talking about childcare in just a moment, but Rob's here to bring us some breaking news relating to the Makerfield by-election first.
Yeah, we've got a new candidate standing in Makerfield for the Green Party, announced in the last few minutes. Her name is Sarah Wakefield. The Green Party will put her up. She's 38 years old, a mum with 2 young children and currently a councillor on Manchester City Council, although she's currently on maternity leave as a charity director and has worked in retail before with a focus on sustainable food. This is the second candidate the Greens have had up in Makerfield. The first person they put up stepped back, he said, for personal reasons, but it came after some stories were circulating about inappropriate posts on social media that he had made fairly recently. So the Greens have come up with someone else. They'll be standing this candidate now. Obviously, they had great success in the Gorton and Denton by-election and got elected there earlier this year. A bit of a different constituency, I guess, in Makerfield, but I think they'll be hoping that they can try and peel some votes away from Andy Burnham and Labour. You know, there had been some wondering whether they would sort of step aside and give Andy Burnham a clearer run, but they said no, we're going for this and we're standing. And so this is their candidate, and you would have thought at this point the person that will be on the ultimate ballot.
We've got a graphic of all of the candidates before this announcement, so you won't see the Greens candidate on this list, but here are all of the other candidates standing on the 18th of June. Rob, bring us up to speed on what the government are talking about today in terms of how they're trying to clamp down on extra childcare costs for people.
Yeah, there's been a lot of focus on cost of living from the government in the last few weeks especially. You had all those announcements last week from Rachel Reeves about the summer and family holidays and family trips. So I think this is in the vein of that. Not to say it's just politicking. It is it is an issue that a lot of people experience. It's connected to the free childcare offer that the government has. Basically, if you've got a child between 9 months and school age and you're a working family on certain salaries, you can get 30 hours a week of free childcare. Now, the aim of that is that if there is the free childcare offer, it will mean more people can go into work. So it's good for the economy and has a broader benefit for the country. The difficulty that the government has identified that's been flagged to them by some families, though, is that when families are going to try and get these free places in nurseries or with childminders, they're encountering other costs that are being put on top of the free place. So they might be asked for a non-refundable deposit, or they might be told that they can have their free place, but they have to buy extra hours on top of the 30 hours a week, or be charged for things like, food or nappy costs or creams and things like that. And that's making it unaffordable. So the Education Secretary's asked the Competition Markets Authority to look into these sort of hidden fees that people are facing and to figure out whether they are fair. The response you get from the childcare sector and from nurseries is basically that the sector has been chronically underfunded for years, that the money they get from the government for those free places just isn't enough to run a commercially viable business off, and that is why they essentially cross-subsidise it with these extra fees as well. And that, their point is, great, have this review, but don't just look at the extra fees we're looking at, maybe look at whether the funding streams for the actual hours, whether they are viable and whether that needs to go up and be changed as well.
Chris, thanks so much. Rob Powell there for us. Right, let's talk more about the state of the economy in light of both the war but also various other developments in recent weeks and on a day when oil prices are rising again a little bit, $98 now for Brent, up 2%, so obviously below some of the peaks of recent weeks. Joining us to discuss all of this, the Chief Economic Advisor at Allianz, Mohammed El-Erian. Mohammed, very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. I guess the first question is just on what you see as the sort of likely range of oil prices in the days ahead. We fell a lot late last week on hopes of peace talks, which clearly are easing a bit this morning. Do you think under $100 of Brent is going to last or not?
Good morning, Wilfred. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on Arsenal. It lasts if the negotiations continue and if you contain the military option. And it's important that it lasts, Wilfred, because, as we just heard, the cost of living is an economic, social, and political issue, and it will get worse as people feel their purchasing power is being eroded. What we will not see is prices going back to what they were before the war. It's going to take months for that to happen, even if there's a peace deal today.
We obviously had inflation data last week, and it was better than expected. It was below even 3%. Do you think that hides the reality of the pressures that we're going to feel in the economy in the months ahead, even if the straits are reopened soon?
You're going to hate this, a mixed response. On the one hand, it was better because service inflation, which has been a real problem, is coming down. On the other hand, there's controlled prices, in particular energy prices, that were brought down, and that's artificial. Most people, unfortunately, expect that by the end of the year, inflation will be closer to 4% than below 3% as it came in the last release.
Realistically, will the Bank of England be able to cut rates in the foreseeable future?
No, there's almost no chance of that happening. The big question is, will they hike rates? I think on balance, they'll stay where they are. But if that is not the outcome, it's more likely because they've had to hike rates than cut rates.
So much, of course, of what's going on at the moment is the question about how the government can respond to rising prices. We just talked about it with childcare costs, but it's been much broader than that. Do you think the government has much ammunition if things get much worse to step in?
They're having to strike a very delicate balance. They do not have the flexibility that past governments have had. In addition, they've now understood how important it is to stick to Rachel Reeves' budget rules, because we've seen the bond market being nervous. We've seen yields go well above 5%. They've come down. So no, the real problem is neither the government nor the Bank of England has the possibility of responding and protecting us as much as they did after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, during COVID, during the global financial crisis. That flexibility is much eroded, unfortunately, Wilfred.
Well, you mentioned their UK borrowing costs. The 10-year, for example, went up to 5.1% 10 days or 2 weeks ago. It's down at 4.8% this morning. What would you put that down to? Is it as simple as where the oil price is and how peace talks in the Middle East are going, or is there a lot of the politics playing a part there too?
So oil prices have helped. I think Andy Burnham's comment that he will stick to the fiscal rules were a big deal, and we saw yields come down significantly. And then the third element is the UK is what's called the high beta. When yields globally go up, it goes up a lot more. When yields globally come down, it comes down a lot more. And recently, yields around the world have come down. But even at 480, that's still too high. That eats up fiscal space, headroom, as they call it. And it makes the interest bill increase at a very uncomfortable pace.
Mohammed, clearly the pressure from the Middle East is significant on the UK, as it is on lots of countries. Break down for us the extent to which there is a genuine pressure on President Trump in terms of the US economy from the Middle East war. Is it hitting all Americans? Is it not really reaching most of them? What's the effect there?
So even before the war, affordability, the cost of living, was a major political issue. And President Trump came in promising that he would deal with that. Since then, the sense in the US is affordability has gotten more difficult, and mainly because of petrol prices. The average price is now $4.50. That doesn't sound much in UK terms because it's per gallon. However, in the US, that's almost a 50% increase. So enormous pressure on President Trump because of the domestic political economic situation. And there's real concern among the Republicans that they may lose at least one house at the midterms in November because of this affordability issue.
Mohammed, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for joining us, and congrats to QPR coming 15th.
Thank you.
Mohammed Al-Arian joining us there.
We have some breaking news to bring you. We're hearing from Lebanon's state-run national news agency. They're reporting an Israeli strike on a village in eastern Lebanon. They're saying it's killed at least 12 people. It's happened, they say, in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. This, of course, comes after Benjamin Netanyahu promised intensified attacks targeting intensive infrastructure linked to the Hezbollah militant group across Lebanon. The Israeli military, as things stand, haven't commented on this particular attack yet. We know that since the start of this war in March, 3,100 people have been killed so far. But this is the latest that we're getting from state media, that at least 12 people have been killed in Israeli strikes on a village in eastern Lebanon.
Further pressure, of course, on those peace talks in light of ongoing military exchanges. Now, not long until millions of football fans flock to Mexico for the World Cup, of course, one of the three countries hosting it with the US and Canada. And one of the biggest challenges facing authorities is security.
Yeah, the country has sunk tens of millions of pounds into securing the Games, but the fact still that there are risks of being overshadowed by the spectre of Mexico's drug cartels.
Our US correspondent Martha Kellner joined a group of families desperately searching for their loved ones who have disappeared. And a warning, her report contains the moment they discover the remains of one person who'd been taken.
Guadalajara is getting a facelift. Mexico's second city is preparing to host 4 World Cup games. Security is being stepped up. Excitement is building. But there's a darker side to this place.
Sadly, all those images are representing missing people here in Guadalajara.
Across the city, there's a seemingly endless catalogue of faces. Some of the more than 16,000 people who have disappeared from the wider Jalisco state area. Many of them, it's thought, have been murdered by cartels. But the families of the missing say they've been abandoned by the authorities. I'm in the hills above Guadalajara with 11 women from a group known as Guerreros Buscadores, or Warrior Searchers, and they're digging for graves.
Maribel is on the phone at the moment to the person who gave them the tip to come to this area. She's trying to find where exactly they discovered what they thought might be bones.
They wear the faces of their loved ones. Some have done searches like this dozens, even hundreds of times. In relentless heat, without machinery, it's back-breaking and unbelievably bleak work, driven by desperation. After an hour of searching, the women think they might have a breakthrough. It's here, she says.
All the women have rushed over to this specific area. That's because the tip that they received was from someone who said that they thought there might be a bag underneath a large rock in this area. And so they're attacking it with picks and shovels and their hands.
First, they find a bone. And then... I think that's a head, she says. I think it's a head. He still has hair, says another. They uncover an entire skeleton wrapped in plastic. It's buried alongside registration plates, a car key and an empty wallet.
There's a really strange contradiction of emotions here because these women are looking for bodies and they believe they've found one. But they also know that, you know, while this might not be their missing loved one, it is someone's family member.
Sandra, who's been looking for her son for 7 years, has to turn away. As one searcher breaks the ground, another urges the women to say a prayer. The group gather in a circle. Among them, Lupita, who's looking for her 5 children. Her daughter went missing first, then her 4 sons.
Those 4 were taken all at once at the same time, in the same day. They disappeared on December 19, 2019. Lucerito, my daughter, disappeared first on a highway on June 6, 2016. I've been looking for her for 10 years, but I haven't given up hope on bringing her back home. It's a mixed bag of emotions. I feel a lot of anxiety. We came here full of hope, but we also don't want to find them here. It is terrible.
This is a brave endeavour too. By conducting these searches, the women risk retribution from the cartels. Across Mexico, a number of women have been killed for doing just this. They call the police to tell them about the body they've found. 2 hours later, officers arrive. They promise they will investigate.
Is this a problem for people coming to the World Cup?
No, ninguna.
No, none. There's no problem about this, he says.
They don't have to worry about this, about cartels?
Like what, he asks. No, not at all.
Ninguno.
Violence erupted in Mexico in February after a notorious cartel boss was killed by the military near Guadalajara. Some called for the city to be stripped of its World Cup games. Now there's a show of force to project a sense of safety and order. Local authorities in Mexico have spent $55 million on security and surveillance for this World Cup. They'll be using drones,
attention, please exit the area immediately,
robots and Black Hawk helicopters. The head of the police force, which includes the stadium, shows me where they'll be monitoring fans.
One of the things that our mayor has made sure of is guaranteeing the safety of all the people who come.
What would you say to the families of missing people who are searching for the bodies of their own loved ones and feel that they're not a priority here?
Actually, there are different issues. There are various state agencies that receive reports from the searching mothers regarding where they believe their missing loved ones might be. Although they are acting outside the law, they are still assisted and their cases are followed up on. As a municipal authority, we can only support these efforts by working to prevent these crimes.
His words ring hollow for Maribel. Her brother Jose, who has 5 children, is missing. All she knows is that he was taken by people in a pickup truck. For 5 years, she searched for answers without any help from authorities.
There is so much money being spent on policing this World Cup, yet you are going out quite literally with picks and shovels on your own to try and find your missing family members. How does that make you feel?
The authorities are worrying too much about the safety of the foreigners, of people who come to the World Cup, but they are not thinking about the security of us, their relatives. That we expose ourselves a lot in each search, we risk our lives. We don't have the support from any institution.
Money that Maribel would have spent on her 4-year-old daughter instead goes to looking for her brother.
The World Cup, with all its trappings, will take place a short drive from here. It feels a world away. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Guadalajara, Mexico.
Well, still so much more to come on Mornings here on Sky News. After the break, we'll be speaking to author Dave Clements about the crisis in special needs education.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
So we're going to talk about special educational needs and disabilities now, also known as SEND. Our next guest is calling for more of an honest conversation about how to support young people at school. Dave Clements is here with us. He's the author of the book, The Crisis in the Classroom. And this is really close to your heart, isn't it, Dave? Hello.
Hi. Yeah, it is. I suppose the impetus for writing the book was that my son was diagnosed with autism and ADHD when he first started school, and I kind of had to deal with initially not wanting to believe that was the case, but then coming to terms with that. But at the same time, and the book is about more than that, at the same time I was looking around myself and looking around other people, other kids, other families' experiences, and there seems to be something else going on. There seems to be an explosion of autism, ADHD, mental health problems. And then there's other problems going on in schools as well, particularly post-lockdown, around exclusions, around children not attending school. And I just wanted to try and make sense of it, because it seems to me that it didn't seem realistic to expect that you get so much of this going on all at once. You know, over 1 million children and adults with autism, just in England, over 2 million with ADHD, nearly 2 million with special educational needs, and 500,000 of those with EHCPs, or education, health and care plans, which are intended for
the most
children.
Complex.
Absolutely, children with the most complex needs. So I wanted to make sense of that, because it didn't seem to make sense that all of this could be happening at once. And so I kind of look into in the book, I look into the cultural factors.
And what's interesting, what struck with me, because I have an 8-year-old who's diagnosed dyslexia and we're exploring ADHD, is that many parents feel like no one's really listening, or that you're in a sea and you're swimming against the tide. It's difficult for so many parents. You want an honest conversation about that here and now. What's the one argument you would want to say out loud to government ministers, to parents today, that's not being said?
It's very hard to make any definitive statements about these kinds of conditions, because there's a lot of debate, particularly around conditions like ADHD, even within the medical profession, about whether it even exists. So there's a lot of problems around trying to get a hold of what it is we're trying to deal with here. And I think in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, I think some of the explosion of need that we're seeing is down to a tendency to label. We look for labels rather than trying to understand what the problems might be, what the underlying problems might be. Some of these may be to do with parenting, potentially. Some of them may be to do with issues in the community, with a lack of adult authority, perhaps. So if you see behaviour problems in schools, there's a tendency to assume that that is down to ADHD or some other condition, when it could be that there are other issues out there which are more amenable to people just on a day-to-day basis.
So are you calling for the education system to be remodelled to work for more people? Because what we do know is that teachers are exhausted, council budgets are in deficit. Meanwhile, there's a whole cohort of young people and children that are not having the right needs addressed, particularly in those early years settings.
Absolutely. I think because the system has been flooded with so much need, and so many people wanting assessments, you have this problem where people with genuine needs and children with genuine needs aren't getting those needs met, because there aren't the resources available, there aren't the educational psychologists out there, local authorities are going bust, or certainly potentially going bust as a consequence. So I think we're in a situation where, because we're not making that distinction between genuine need and other issues that people are facing, there's this kind of overwhelming of the system. And that's happening in the welfare system as well as the SEND system.
Dave, I can feel your emotion. As a parent of a SEND child, I know that story all too well. The question then to wrap, and the hardest one, I think, is how do you fix it? How do you make it work for everyone?
I think, as I say, we have to start looking elsewhere for some of our answers, rather than looking to label our children all the time. And I say this as somebody who, has had to accept that my child does have a label.
Some people will find that quite controversial, actually, won't they, out there?
They will, but I think it's important to say it, because even as a parent, I understand that not every child necessarily has these conditions, and sometimes there are other explanations. And I think we should be reluctant to label our kids. I think we should be much more willing to look outside into our communities, and to understand that there is an element of wanting to identify with a label because it's an easy solution, because by naming it, it feels like you've kind of got an answer. Sometimes you have, but in a lot of cases you haven't, and I think we need to be able to kind of make that distinction.
OK. Dave, thanks so much for coming in. I know it's half-term, so it would be a juggle for you. Really appreciate you talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
We're going to pivot back to the situation in the Middle East next. Michael Clark is back with us to discuss those military strikes by the US on Iran last night. We also, of course, have seen some further Israeli attacks in Lebanon. By the way, the IRGC have just responded saying that they question the ceasefire. If we can just scroll back up and see what they have the right to respond, they're saying. Michael, great to see you again. How significant are these latest 24 hours worth of military attacks?
Yeah, I mean, the situation is slipping back towards military action. The United States said these were defensive attacks, and anything can be regarded as a defensive attack. So it looks as if they attacked some sites around Bandar Abbas and Jask in the south, which might have been missile launching sites being prepared. The Americans attacked a couple of boats they said were planting mines, which is entirely plausible. And so, yes, they can be regarded as defensive attacks, but they didn't have to do it now. The fact that they did it overnight, I think, was an indication to the Iranians that they shouldn't assume that the Americans won't go back to a military policy, and that's what Trump had said. I think that was a demonstration. The IRGC have now responded to that. It's interesting that Muqtada Khamenei, has made a statement attributed to him just now, saying that the Americans can't assume that they can move around in the Gulf anymore. They have to assume now that this is an area of high risk for them. They don't have any right to it. So the Iranians are clearly responding, while the Israelis have made it very clear. They said that they are going to intensify their war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And again, statements have been made by the right-wing members of the Israeli government saying that this is the time to go all in against Hezbollah.
So, in those strikes across Iran, this self-defence line that the US is putting out, what's the logic behind 1 minute there's strikes and the next they're trying to do diplomacy mediated by Pakistan? For me, it feels confusing.
Yeah, Gideon Rachman in the Financial Times just today, he said the Americans are trying in vain to improve a losing position. That they're actually, politically, they're in a losing position, and they're trying to improve that position not very effectively by, again, threatening to go back to all-out military operations. But we know President Trump is extremely reluctant to go back to the situation that he was in before the 7th of April, when the ceasefire was created, the latest ceasefire, when he said, tonight a civilization will end. That was an astonishing statement. He didn't understand what he was saying, I'm sure. But, both he and the Iranians frightened themselves at the point they got to. The Iranians were threatening all-out war against the region. Trump was threatening all-out war against Iran, which would have been, self-confessed war crimes in the way that he was actually expressing it. They both frightened themselves, and they've both backed off. And what the Americans now have found is that has diminished their negotiating position, and the Iranians don't believe that they will go back to that all-out war. And if they do, the Iranians will go back to all-out war against the region.
How realistic is it that the Strait gets meaningfully reopened then in the weeks ahead?
Well, it's part of the so-called deal. If this package goes through in the ways that we understand it, there'll be a 60-day process of lessening the restrictions in the Strait. It would open gradually over 60 days. So the Iranians would, as it were, step down their closure of the Straits. There wouldn't be any fees charged. They'd let more ships through. The Americans would step down their particular blockade of all Iranian stuff going through. Quite a lot is actually, not a lot, but some ships are going through on a reasonably regular basis now. Chinese ships and ships with Chinese oil, ships with oil for Pakistan as a reward, they're getting out. With the agreement of the Iranians. So 5 or 6 ships have gone out in the last couple of days. It's not total. And the fact is that the Straits could open tomorrow if both sides said the Straits are open. But they won't open tomorrow because it suits both sides to do it in a gradual way.
So what does any deal look like? Because over the weekend it appeared optimistic. What do you think, Michael? 4
elements in the package of any deal. One, the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. That's the most immediate thing that everybody wants. Secondly, the initiation of talks on all of the various nuclear issues between Iran and the United States, and there's very complex issues in that. Thirdly, sanctions relief for the Iranians and unfreezing assets. There's £25 billion of Iranian assets frozen around the world. 6 billion of them are sitting in Doha. That's what they were talking about yesterday. And then the 4th element of the package is ceasefire in Lebanon. Now, all those 4 elements have got lots of showstoppers in them, and all 4 elements would be negotiated over a 60-day period. An awful lot could go wrong, but that's what the package at the moment looks like. And the problem is, to most people, even in the Republican heartland of America, that looks like a loss. Politically, that means America has lost the war, because all of those 4 elements just put everything back to where they were before the 28th of February, when you were on that Saturday morning, you and I were on, when suddenly the Americans and the Israelis had started this bombing policy. And that package would just put everything back to before that morning of the 28th of February. So what was the war all about, if that is the best that the Americans can come up with? That's it. They're trying to improve a losing position. That's now, I think, the neutral view of the whole thing.
Michael, as always, thanks so much.
Thank you.
We can take a quick break. When we come back, the UK is quickly becoming one of the most important proving grounds for China's global auto ambitions. We'll talk about those. Chinese EVs next.
interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die? This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
Are these immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
Shift. This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Chinese car makers have increased here in Britain. New figures are showing the number of dealerships has increased more than 4 times since 2024.
Let's bring in the Chief Customer Officer, at Auto Trader, Ian Plummer. Ian, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. So Chinese cars, in particular EVs, are taking off.
Chinese cars are definitely picking up, but it's not just EVs. It is EVs, you're quite right, that have led the charge. But they're bringing in a whole raft of plug-in hybrids, range extender vehicles, as well as even some petrol models that are all doing very well. So EVs are the standout, but they're all growing the market share of the Chinese brands up to around 18% right now. So doubling virtually on where they were this time last year. And as you mentioned, taking an increasing share of the retailer space too.
Ian, why do you think this is happening?
Well, fundamentally, I think the car buyer out there is very avidly taking up the opportunity of buying the latest technology, the best products out there, accessing the best possible choice of models. So these brands are bringing in all of that. The choice factor is huge. The pricing of these products is good. They're not cheap, but they're great value. They're full of options and specification that makes them a great package for buyers. But it's also a very attractive option for retailers. You know, retailers are very keen to add in an additional revenue stream to their business, either keeping an existing brand and adding in one of the Chinese brands next to them, or potentially replacing a current brand. It gives them choice, flexibility, and a bit of leverage, to be honest.
Did you say that their market share has gone from 9% to 18% of UK car sales?
Roughly speaking, 18% at the moment, yeah, just under 18%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's really, I mean, it's huge growth. And talk us through what kind of tariffs or that we do put on place on them or not. Are they as cheap as they would be in a totally free market?
Well, worth pointing out, just coming back to the growth numbers, that the market at the moment, I think we should recognise, is in a very healthy place. The retail car market for new cars in the UK is currently up 12% year to date on prior year, and prior year wasn't too bad. It's still not at the levels of volume we were at pre-pandemic, when we would typically do 2.4, 2.5 million new cars each year. We'll probably get to north of 2.1 million this year. But the market growth is being driven by the Chinese brands. So the sum of all the established brands in the market, non-Chinese, etc., in terms of growth year on year in that 12% I just mentioned, is actually 0.1%. So there's hardly anything coming from the existing brands. The new players are adding that choice factor, affordability, and that's what's driving the market at the moment. So that's good to see from an economic point of view, as well as a consumer point of view. To your point on tariffs, there isn't an additional tariff on Chinese product at the moment. That is enabling the car manufacturers from China to access the UK consumer, who themselves is a very open-minded, product-driven buyer, less and less likely to be loyal. 4 in 10 of us typically used to buy the same new car brand that we came from. That number's come down in the last year to 36%. It's sliding progressively over the last few years. And that number is less than half for people buying electric or plug-in hybrids. So we're much more likely to be looking around when we go into those new technologies, and that gives an opportunity to these new players.
Ian, really interesting. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ian Plummer from Auto Trader.
Now, Sky News has seen data that shows the latest AI chatbots are getting too good at hacking.
And the rate at which they're improving is growing exponentially. Our technology correspondent, Roland Manthorpe, explains.
No pressure, but I think we have about 6 to 12 months to patch a gigantic chunk of software or face some really serious consequences. And the reason, of course, is this: the new AI models being released by companies like Anthropic, most notably Mythos. Sure, you've heard of Mythos, right? It's the model that Anthropic said was so powerful they couldn't actually release it. And honestly, you know, when I heard that, I was actually a bit sceptical. I wasn't sure they provided the evidence to really back that up. But since that moment happened, about 6 weeks ago, new data has started to come out, which, honestly, it shows that this stuff is extremely real. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So let's start here. This is from Mozilla, the makers of Firefox, the browser. And it shows their monthly bug fixes going back about a year and a half. And you can see, for a long time, Mozilla have been fixing about roughly 30 bugs a month. Every month they do the same. And then, in February, something started to be really exciting for them. They started to use AI. Look, they got from here up to 76 that month. And then, through Anthropic, they got access to Mythos. And this was how many bug fixes they completed. This is the gap between what we had before and Mythos. This is the jumping capability. And yeah, look, sure, this is just one company, and also numbers of bug fixes. It's not always the best measure because, you know, not all bug fixes are equal, right? Some can be quite small and some can be really big. But we're also getting independent assessments, which roughly show the same thing. So this is a graph from the AI Security Institute based here in London. I think probably the world's leading AI security institute. And it shows the results on their cyber assault course, which simulates the takeover of a company. It's rather ominously called The Last Ones. I don't know why. And you can see, so back here, Claude Sonnet 3.7, that was released in January 2025. And at that point, AI could complete the initial reconnaissance of a network. It could get in and have a look around, snoop around, but that was really it. By the time Mythos came out, it was up to step 22 on average. And it could do privilege escalation. It could get inside the network and then work its way up, getting more and more privileges to attack the network. But now, this is the important point here, right? This was the moment of the Mythos panic. Suddenly, everyone began to think about banks and national security. There was a big worry about it. But I want to show you what has happened since, which is much less talked about. These are the results on the AI Security Institute test of the models that have been released since Mythos. You can see OpenAI released GPT 5.5 and GPT 5.5 Cyber. Yeah, I know the names in here are a complete nightmare, but these are the OpenAI models. And also, even more confusingly, Anthropic released a new version of Mythos. But the names aren't the point. The point is the results. Because the last one's test only has 32 steps. And on their best attempt, the best models can now take over the network.
Yeah, that's just a clip from Roland's full analysis. Scan the QR code to watch it in full. He goes on to talk about what's been done to prevent criminals getting their hands on new tech, and also why so-called open source models may soon make that impossible.
Time for a quick look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
The weather will cool off towards the end of the week, despite temperatures remaining above average after what has been, of course, a record-breaking bank holiday weekend, with the intense heat continuing in the south today, but it should begin to ease elsewhere. In terms of the start today, it's dry and sunny across all of the country. Temperatures in the south will already be in late teens, early 20s, and will respond rapidly to early sunshine. Scotland and Northern Ireland will also be bright or sunny, but significantly cooler. Parts of England and Wales will become very warm again, with temperatures heading back to 33 or 34 Celsius. Scotland, Ireland and Eastern England will see their fair share of sunshine, but will have temperatures closer to average for this time of the year.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Lots more still to come here on Mornings. We'll be back with the very latest on the situation in the Middle East, as, of course, small military salvos have begun again, pushing oil prices slightly higher.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story.
the battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Boleto and Frost.
Yeah, a very good morning from me. Lots on the way. Here's what's in store.
The United States conducts what it calls self-defense strikes in southern Iran against the backdrop of ongoing peace talks.
The heat wave continues, and so too do the warnings over cold water swimming. 3 teenagers have now died after jumping into water.
A group of leading British doctors say social media is just as dangerous for young people as smoking.
Also ahead, we've been looking at the potential tidal wave of cyber attacks that could come from rapidly improving AI systems.
Mexico faces a missing persons crisis. We speak to the women taking matters into their own hands to find their loved ones.
On to our top story then. The United States has launched renewed strikes on Iran at a crunch time, really, for ongoing peace talks.
The US military says the strikes in the south of the country were in self-defense, and a spokesperson for US Central Command, Captain Tim Hawkins, said the strikes were to protect our troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Targets included missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to emplace mines. US Central Command continues to defend our forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire.
Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has insisted the Strait of Hormuz must be opened one way or another.
What's happening there is unlawful, it's illegal, it's unsustainable for the world, it's unacceptable. I don't know of any country in the world that does it. The Russians are not in favor of a tolling system. The Chinese are not in favor of a tolling system. I mean, there's no country in the world that's in favor of a tolling system except the regime in Iran. So that's not acceptable. That cannot happen. The straits need to be open, unimpeded, without tolls.
Also this morning, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's about to step up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Yeah, the Israeli military hit over 70 targets in the south of the country. This was yesterday, despite the existence of a ceasefire agreement. Here's what Netanyahu had to say on social media.
We will hit them. It's true they're shooting drones at us. We have a special team working on that, and we'll solve that too. In the meantime, you're showing resilience. I want to bless the residents of the North's resilience that inspires all of us. But what this requires of us now is to increase the blows, to increase the intensity. We'll smite them with overwhelming force.
Well, Lebanese authorities say Israeli strikes have killed more than 3,100 people since early March. Let's bring in Sally, who's live for us in Dubai. Sally, what is the latest in terms of the strikes from the US in the last 24 hours? And have we seen any official response yet from the Iranians?
Well, the Iranians have come out and said a number of things in the last 24 hours when it comes to diplomatic efforts. But it seems that the Revolutionary Guard have now responded to these attacks on southern Iran overnight by the US. And they've said that they reserve the right to respond. And we're also hearing various other lines that are unconfirmed via Iranian media that the IRGC also shot at a drone that they say infringed their airspace over the Persian Gulf overnight, as well as a US F-35 fighter jet. As I say, absolutely no confirmation of that, but those are the lines that we're hearing via the Iranians this morning. And it just underscores how tense this ceasefire is in the backdrop of what is intense diplomatic efforts at the moment. You know, there was a lot of fast jet activity in the sky over the UAE last night. It usually means something's going on. It's a little over a week since the UAE itself was attacked. And of course, we now know that it was this clash in the Strait of Hormuz, US Central Command confirming that they hit missile launch sites as well as boats that were reportedly laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. And every time there's one of these flare-ups or some sort of clash, there's a lot of nervousness and concern in this region that the ceasefire could collapse altogether. It hasn't, it's still holding for now, but we've seen regular violations of the ceasefire in the last few weeks, and there is a lot of concern, and all this is happening at the same time. We're seeing potentially the most promise so far when it comes to diplomatic efforts between the US and Iran since this war kicked off.
And just help us understand, Sally, where we are when it comes to diplomatic talks. The US talking about, you know, self-defence attacks on parts of Iran. Meanwhile, they're taking part in diplomacy. How does that land, really?
You know, you hear one thing from Donald Trump on Truth Social and via the White House, and they've been talking up diplomatic efforts in the last few days, and then it can feel very different, the reality on the ground. And certainly when you listen to what the two sides are saying, it still feels like they're very far apart in terms of what they're willing to accept when it comes to some sort of agreement. But we do know that the Iranian negotiating team are in Qatar at the moment, interestingly, given that Qatar has been attacked on a number of occasions by Iran during the war. They now seem to be stepping up in some sort of mediation role. They also are home to, you know, billions of dollars of frozen Iranian assets, interestingly. But when you listen to what the Iranians are saying, they say, yes, we have come to some sort of conclusion on various key issues, but, you know, don't expect some sort of imminent deal. And not only do you have the very delicate situation in the Strait of Hormuz, which, you know, we see continual flare-ups, and that is their most powerful bargaining chip. The Iranians are not going to give that up easily. They've also said that any agreement needs to extend to all fronts in terms of a cease in fighting, including Lebanon. And we've heard in the last 24 hours Benjamin Netanyahu saying that they're going to step up their attacks on Hezbollah. Dozens of people have been killed in Lebanon in Israeli strikes in the last 24 hours. So that is also something that could derail these talks. And then on top of all that, Donald Trump has come out and said that you know, if there is an agreement, he wants to see a requirement that other Arab nations would sign the Abraham Accords, which would normalise diplomatic relations with Israel. It's something that the UAE signed in 2020, followed by Bahrain. So it seems that Donald Trump is also now trying to conflate what is an already very complicated Iran deal with some sort of broader reshaping of the Middle East, which not only feels hugely unrealistic at the moment, it also threatens to really overload extremely delicate diplomatic efforts.
Sally, great stuff. Thanks so much. And unsurprisingly, we've seen oil prices tick back up again this morning, albeit off a big pullback last week. Brent crude is at $99 a barrel this morning, up 3%. Now, some awful news amid this ongoing heatwave now, and 3 teenagers have died in separate incidents after getting into difficulty in the water. Well, police in Warwickshire say the body of a teenage girl was pulled from the water in Kingsbury Water Park yesterday evening.
Meanwhile, West Yorkshire police say officers were called to Leadbeater Dam on Lum after about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, where the body of a 13-year-old boy was pulled out of the water. The police say he was taken to hospital and was sadly pronounced dead.
In Lincoln, the body of a 15-year-old was recovered and has been named as Declan Sawyer. In a statement, Declan's father said they'd like to raise awareness about children playing near rivers or lakes. Water companies have been warning about the risk of cold water shock, as many large bodies of water are still sitting at winter temperatures. Do, of course, be careful in this warm weather today.
Yeah, absolutely. In other news, a group of UK top doctors, they're warning that social media could be having as bad an impact on young people's health as smoking.
It's a report from the Academy of Royal Colleges, which pointed to multiple impacts that it's having on kids. Well, Oliver's here to break down some of the most standout lines of this letter they've sent the government.
So basically saying that there is now potentially a wave of radicalised children who are viewing this extreme, often violent content online, and that poses a real risk and potential catastrophic risk to society, according to these top doctors. And if you think about the internet, for years has been an unregulated space when it came to these videos, have inspired the likes of some child killers, including the killers of Esther Jai, Brianna Jai, the transgender teenager. Those children had been online in the weeks before and had seen torture videos online and then went on to commit their crimes. In other cases, the doctor's saying that at least once a week they are seeing and treating young people who are coming in either with mental health issues or physical health issues where they've been copying or influenced by these videos that they're seeing online. So what they're saying is that the government needs to take a stronger stance here. And it's all part of this consultation that the government is wrapping up today, looking at what it's like living in an online age.
Yeah, we've heard from the government, haven't we? They've said it's not about whether they take action, it's when that will come into place. And the consultation ending this week, what are we likely to hear? Because, you know, Kemi Badenoch waded in and said there should be an entire, you know, ban, Australian style. We've heard from Angela Rayner too. Even Wes Streeting's been talking about it.
Yeah, so the former Health Secretary saying that there needs to be a Australia-style ban on social media for the under-16s. What's quite interesting is that the online safety minister is currently in Australia and meeting with his Australian counterparts, talking about how they can keep young people safe. So it looks like with the government minister being in Australia, speaking to the Australians who've rolled out this ban, potentially that's something that is coming down the track for us. So far, though, we've had no official word from the government if that is indeed the route that they will be taking. But it looks like the mood music of heading there, because the government has previously faced criticism for not being tough enough when it comes to protecting young people about the ban on mobile phones in schools, which they then had to row back on. There is a growing pressure from people for this Australian-type ban, but not everybody agrees. There are others who say bringing a ban won't be enough. People will find a way to circumvent it, and also it's not being proved to be fully effective as of yet.
Oliver, great stuff. Thanks so much. Meanwhile, the Education Secretary has confirmed she's pursuing reports of hidden extra charges in government-funded childcare. Rob is here to break down exactly what we're talking about here, Rob.
Yeah, so this is connected to some of the extra costs, charges, fees that parents might be faced with when they go and try and get their child into a nursery to take advantage of the free childcare offer that the government kind of came into force fully only from September last year, 30 hours from 9 months right up to school age. So it was a big chunky policy designed to put more support in there so parents could put their kids into nursery, into childcare, and would be more likely to be able to go out and work, bringing broader benefits for the economy. The problem that some parents have been finding that's been picked up by the government is that when they try and access this free childcare, they might be faced with non-refundable deposits being charged by the nursery, or fees for food or trips that we spoke about earlier, nappies, things like that. And that is always all building up and making it unaffordable and leading to some parents just saying, well, I can't afford it anyway. Now, what you hear from the childcare sector and nurseries is basically that these extra charges are needed to make the whole thing commercially viable, that the sector has been grossly underfunded for years, and that actually these sort of cross-subsidies are needed so that the business can stay afloat. But what the Education Secretary is asking now is for the Competition and Markets Authority, the regulator, to look into these charges and report back to them, and it might go into a broader piece of work that's going on in government around childcare reviews at the moment.
Really interesting. Thank you, Rob.
Great stuff. Thanks so much. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joining the mothers and sisters trying to solve Mexico's missing persons crisis.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. Time to speak to the opposition now. We're joined by the Shadow Home Office Minister Katie Lamb. A very good morning to you and thanks for joining us. I wanted to kick off on this letter sent to the government by the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges today and likening social media for young people to seatbelts, to smoking before the rules were changed on those. What do you make of that medical experts' letter on social media?
Well, it's one of many voices. We've heard exactly as you say from them. We've heard from lots of bereaved and concerned parents. We've heard quite a lot from children themselves. The government's consultation on this closes today. And what we very much hope, what the Conservatives very much hope, is that the Prime Minister and the government will treat this issue with the urgency that it deserves.
Do you think it's fair, though, to take time to get, if it is a step as far as a ban, to get it right and listen to, for example, all of the consultation submissions, but the lessons from Australia?
Well, it's always reasonable to make sure whatever you're doing, whatever change you make, that you have thought through the rules, that you, to as much as is possible, have thought about what the unintended consequences might be, that you make sure that whatever rule you have, it can actually be enforced. But the challenge with this government is they don't really seem to do anything very quickly. And so the question is not, are there some challenges here that we need to be aware of, that we need to look at to comparators internationally? You mentioned Australia. The question is the government actually doing the work?
I wanted to ask about the latest in the Middle East. Oil prices ticking up again this morning on the latest military exchanges, albeit framed as defensive by the United States, after a couple of days of very optimistic headlines coming out about peace talks. Is no deal better than a bad deal for President Trump to strike, or is it time for him to draw a line under this particular war and stop pushing up prices for many Westerners like British consumers?
I think the honest truth is that we don't really know. There's a few of the most important elements, particularly I think as they pertain to Iran's nuclear program and to enriched uranium, that we really don't have any idea yet how negotiations around them are going or might go. I think some of the trickiest things the Americans and the Iranians have just sort of decided not to talk about for now. So at this stage, really, it's very difficult to know what a good outcome would be in the short term and in the medium term. Of course, the Americans and everybody internationally is very focused on getting trade moving again and reopening the Straits of Hormuz. I think that would be considered a win in the short term. But it sounds as though even the more positive discussion that you reference was really about going back to sort of January, February status, where these questions, particularly about Iran's nuclear program, remain.
I wanted to ask you about comments made by Giselle Pellico to broadcasters this morning. She said that she's deeply shocked that 3 teenage boys were spared custodial sentences in a recent rape case that I know you've been looking at closely, of two teenage girls that took place in late 24 and early 2025. Is she right? Are you shocked?
Completely. I think what's happened in Hampshire is appalling and disgusting and heartbreaking, what these girls have had to go through. I think the judge, it's Nicholas Rowland, was the judge in Southampton Crown Court. I think that his judgment was was awful. And the idea that, at least as it comes across from the judgment, that he's more worried about criminalising the perpetrators than he is about protecting the victims, I think is terrifying for any of us who care about the safety of women or girls in this country. The sentencing guidelines and the Sentencing Council's guidelines say that if somebody is under 18, then you should avoid criminalising them unnecessarily, is the quote. But it is their behaviour that criminalises them. Even if you are under 18, if you behave in this sort of a way, they have brutally raped 2 girls, including one with the threat of a weapon, then you are a criminal, and the public needs to be protected from the actions of these people. The idea that what we should then do is feel sorry for you, I think is perverse, and it's really frightening.
Just finally, I wanted to ask you what success looks like for the Conservatives in the upcoming Makerfield by-election, with some polls suggesting you could be pushed down the list to 5th or even 6th place. What are you hoping for?
Well, I don't think Makerfield historically has been a place where you would describe the Conservatives as particularly competitive. But we've got a great candidate. I think Michael Winstanley is a fantastic candidate, and we will do all that we can to put our message across to the people of Makerfield. But as we know from the past general elections, where they tend to have elected Labour MPs, and from their recent local elections, where I think almost all of their representatives now are from Reform. Clearly, there are other parties in Makerfield that are at the moment enjoying greater success. But the Aberdeen South by-election, which is on the same day, will be a particular focus for the Conservatives, and that's always the case. There are different parts of the country where at different times the message gets across more or less strongly.
Katie Lamb, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you. And here is a list of all of the candidates standing in the Makerfield by-election on June the 18th.
Now, it's not long until millions of football fans flock to Mexico for the World Cup. And one of the biggest challenges facing authorities is security.
The country's sunk tens of millions of pounds into securing the Games, but that fact still risks being overshadowed by the spectre of Mexico's drug cartels.
Our US correspondent Martha Kellner joined a group of families desperately searching for their loved ones who have disappeared. Just a warning, her report contains the moment they discover the remains of one person who had been taken.
I'm in the hills above Guadalajara with 11 women from a group known as Guerreros Buscadores, or warrior searchers, and they're digging for graves.
Maribel is on the phone at the moment to the person who gave them the tip to come to this area. She's trying to find where exactly they discovered what they thought might be bones.
They wear the faces of their loved ones. Some have done searches like this dozens, even hundreds of times. In relentless heat, without machinery, it's back-breaking and unbelievably bleak work, driven by desperation. After an hour of searching, the women think they might have a breakthrough. It's here, she says.
All the women have rushed over to this specific area. That's because the tip that they received was from someone who said that they thought there might be a bag underneath a large rock in this area. And so they're attacking it with picks and shovels and their hands.
First, they find a bone. And then... I think that's a head, she says. I think it's a head. He still has hair, says another. They uncover an entire skeleton wrapped in plastic. It's buried alongside registration plates, a car key and an empty wallet.
Well worth watching all of Martha's report. You can find it on the Sky News website. Extraordinary access, and of course building up to the start of the World Cup, which takes place in Canada, the US and Mexico, and is Just over 2 weeks away, unbelievably.
Excited, yeah. Lots to come on that. Lots to come on mornings here on Sky News, because we'll be talking about AI after the break. Is it developing at a fast rate? Stay with us for all of that and more. Sky News has seen data that shows the latest AI chatbots are getting too good at hacking.
And the rate at which they're improving is growing exponentially. Our technology correspondent Roland Manthorpe explains what that means.
No pressure, but I think we have about 6 to 12 months to patch a gigantic chunk of software or face some really serious consequences. And the reason, of course, is this: the new AI models being released by companies like Anthropic, most notably Mythos. Sure, you've heard of Mythos, right? It's the model that Anthropic said was so powerful they couldn't actually release it. And honestly, you know, when I heard that, I was actually a bit sceptical. I wasn't sure they provided the evidence to really back that up. But since that moment happened, about 6 weeks ago, new data has started to come out, which, honestly, it shows that this stuff is extremely real. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So let's start here. This is from Mozilla, the makers of Firefox, the browser. And it shows their monthly bug fixes going back about a year and a half. And you can see, for a long time, Mozilla have been fixing about roughly 30 bugs a month. Every month they do the same. And then, in February, something started to be really exciting for them. They started to use AI. Look, they got from here up to 76 that month. And then, through Anthropic, they got access to Mythos. And this was how many bug fixes they completed. This is the gap between what we had before and Mythos. This is the jumping capability. And yeah, look, sure, this is just one company, and also numbers of bug fixes. It's not always the best measure because, you know, not all bug fixes are equal, right? Some can be quite small and some can be really big. But we're also getting independent assessments, which roughly show the same thing. So this is a graph from the AI Security Institute based here in London. I think probably the world's leading AI Security Institute. And it shows the results on their cyber assault course, which simulates the takeover of a company. It's rather ominously called The Last Ones. I don't know why. And you can see, so back here, Claude Sonnet 3.7, that was released in January 2025. And at that point, AI could complete the initial reconnaissance of a network. It could get in and have a look around, snoop around, but that was really it. By the time Mythos came out, it was up to step 22 on average. And it could do privilege escalation. It could get inside the network and then work its way up, getting more and more privileges to attack the network. But now, this is the important point here, right? This was the moment of the Mythos panic. Suddenly, everyone began to think about banks and national security. There was a big worry about it. But I want to show you what has happened since, which is much less talked about. These are the results on the AI Security Institute test of the models that have been released since Mythos. You can see, OpenAI released GPT 5.5 and GPT 5.5 Cyber. Yeah, I know the names in here are a complete nightmare, but these are the OpenAI models. And also, even more confusingly, Anthropic released a new version of Mythos. But the names aren't the point. The point is the results. Because the last one's test only has 32 steps. And on their best attempt, the best models can now take over the network.
Yeah, that's just a clip from Roland's full analysis. You can scan the QR code to... No, it's not there, but it's online, so just go to the Sky News website also. It basically goes on to tell us all about what's been done to prevent criminals getting their hands on new tech, really important, but also why so-called open-source models may soon make that impossible.
Now, Giselle Pellico has said the young women raped by a group of teenage boys must appeal the sentences. In a recent case, 3 teenage boys were spared custodial sentences after being found guilty of raping 2 girls.
Yeah, the judge had said he wanted to avoid criminalising these children unnecessarily. Law officers are reviewing the sentence.
Madame Pellico, who was the woman at the centre of the biggest rape trial in French history, was speaking to our Kathy Newman.
Well, there's been a big controversy over a case here in the UK, 3 teenage boys who managed to escape being jailed after raping 2 teenage girls. What do you make of that case, if you've heard about it since arriving here in the UK? And do you sympathise with some women who fear that rape in this country is effectively decriminalised?
I understand the suffering of those women because it's a daily fight. What I less understand is the attitude of these young men who get the impression, think, well, it's not very serious because they're only 13 or 14 years old. They're responsible for their act. And where are the parents? How have they educated their children? Because after all, I think we have to also tell them it's a crime what they've done, what they've committed. And I don't think that that's something that's been taken into consideration. But at the same time, the victims themselves will never be able to be repaired. They're imprisoned in their bodies their whole lives. They have to appeal. They have to have justice.
Well, one of the victims has said that the sentence was, and I quote, like a rock in her face. What would you say to her?
It's much more than that. It's a girl who's totally destroyed, because after all, a rape is something that's terrifying. And I imagine, because we're talking about a very young woman, how is she going to evolve in her private life? It's very complicated. She must be accompanied, she must see psychiatrists, she must be supported by her parents. I hope her parents were also able to support her. But justice has got to do its work, and that's something that's very important, because otherwise she'll never be able to recover. But the 2 or 3 others, I don't know how many of them, they have to be recognised as being culpable.
When you say justice has to be done, the judiciary needs to look at itself, don't you think, about some of these sentences that are being passed?
Of course. Of course. I believe that today we rape is rather banal. They just think, oh, well, it's not so important. Rape is a crime. It must be recognised in that way, and you've got to judge those who accuse according to the crime they've committed, and not let them go free just because they're minors. Minors at 13 or 14, they already know precisely what they're doing, and they are responsible.
Do you think that's in part because the judiciary is still male-dominated? Is that part of the problem here?
Yes, I believe we're still living with male domination, and the violence certainly is a tool of masculine domination. You can't deny that. And I think that above all, in order to be able to live in harmony between men and women, we have to educate our very young children, because I think the parents, and I'm not saying they're giving up, but I think they have to be a bit more attentive about the education of our children, of their children, especially our boys, and respect one for the other. And if I had to repeat it 100 times or 1,000 times, education and respect for others.
Well, the rest of that interview from Cathy with Giselle Pellico coming up at 7 p.m. tonight. Meanwhile, Labour Party Chair Anna Turley spoke to us earlier this morning and gave her reaction to Madame Pellico's comments.
I was shocked, but obviously I know it's gone back to the Attorney-General to make an assessment now, and I think that's absolutely right. I'm not going to preempt his decision or make any judgment on that, but I think anyone watching that and seeing the evidence and hearing the horrendous story of the victims be absolutely devastated. It's really shocking, and I think, you know, for those young women to go through that experience in the first place is horrendous. But they were so brave in coming forward to the justice system to tell their stories again, to go through that process. It's vital that the system works for those victims, that it supports them, and that it ultimately gives them the justice that is deserved, and that they feel that they've got some kind of justice for what happened to them.
When will the Attorney-General be reporting back on this?
Well, as I understand, I think there's 28 days within which he'll make a decision, but I know it's a huge priority for him, and I know he'll be looking at it carefully. And what we want to do is just make sure that the right decision is made.
Our political correspondent Rob Powell joins us now. So, I mean, what is the process for sentencing and reviewing that sentence that those boys got?
Yeah, we've seen, obviously, criticism coming from right across the political spectrum. Tories earlier said that the judgment was awful. And multiple requests have gone into the Attorney-General, the government's basically top lawyer, under this process known as the unduly lenient sentencing scheme. He's got 28 days to decide whether to refer the case to the Court of Appeal for them to have a look at the sentence of these boys again. So that's until, I think, mid-June, towards the end of June, although there's been suggestions that it may well come back quicker than that. So he will basically be looking at the sentence that they were given, which in this instance were youth rehabilitation orders. It was that they were basically spared prison. They didn't go to prison. He'll be looking at that, looking at the sentencing notes that the judge gave, comparing that to the guidelines, comparing it to case law. And, you know, it's not a case of just looking at the pressure that's coming in and the requests and the people that have gone on TV to criticise it. It is a case of, you know, comparing the actual logic of the sentence in legal terms to what the guidelines were. He'll then make a decision about whether it goes to the Court of Appeal. If it goes to the Court of Appeal, they can then decide to refuse the request, or they can look at it again, in which case the sentence could be increased. So multiple requests had gone into the Attorney-General. You imagine that that decision will probably be made before the full 28-day deadline, and then it may well be that the Court of Appeal looks at it again. I suppose looking through the judge's comments in this, there was this balance really between trying to focus on rehabilitation, which is a big emphasis in sentencing guidelines when it comes to minors, and basically balancing that off with the deterrent effect that sentences give. And also just in instances like this, where it is, you know, gruelling for victims to come forward and give evidence and take part in cases like this, when you don't see very punitive custodial sentences handed out, what does that do to potentially other people coming forward as well? So I don't think anyone's suggesting it's easy to balance this stuff off when it comes to under 18s, but you know, we have seen criticism coming from politicians, and one former Attorney-General has suggested that if the current AG did decide to send this to the Court of Appeal, then the Court of Appeal wouldn't criticise him and say this is a sort of frivolous referral, that there may well be a case.
OK.
Rob,
thanks.
Great stuff, thank you. By the way, Kathy's full interview with Madame Pellico, 7 p.m. tonight on the Kathy Newman Show. Make sure to tune in for that.
So, the much-anticipated World Cup, it kicks off in, what is it, just over 2 weeks' time?
Mad.
It is, the world...
We still haven't finished the European football season, club season, of course.
It's an important
game still to come. And we're literally just over a couple of weeks away. The players, of course, no doubt are not given quite enough time to recover. Some will have more time to recover over the summer than they'd planned, having been left out of the England squad, including the likes of Cole Palmer, Phil Foden, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Harry Maguire. Let's talk about it all now with sports broadcaster Faye Carruthers. Faye, first and foremost, I mean, it is crazy how close the two seasons are together.
Yeah, in many ways, but at the same time, we had a mid-season World Cup just a few years ago, if you remember, in Qatar in 2022. That was in December, right in the middle of the season. So this doesn't actually feel anywhere near as bad as that, although obviously the players are going to need a little bit of rest and relaxation after a crazy Premier League season and other leagues for the likes of Harry Kane, for example, who lifted another trophy with Bayern Munich at the weekend. So the players are well used to this, and that's what the prep camp that Thomas Tuchel is taking the England players out on just next week. Actually, they fly next Monday out to Miami for a prep camp in Florida before everything kicks off, as you say, in a couple of weeks' time.
Faye, let's talk about some of the players. Obviously, we covered there who has been left out. But Ivan Toney, in after just, 10 minutes under Thomas Tuchel, plays abroad. What do you think the logic is here?
Yeah, not even 10 minutes, 5 minutes. He came on in the 88th minute and then played added time. So I think it was a shock. And actually, Thomas Tuchel in his press conference said himself it was a shock to him and his staff that Ivan kept coming up again and again as a player that had to be on the plane. When I sat down and spoke to him one-on-one afterwards, he said actually it was 51% in favour of Ivan Toney, 49% in favour of Leeds United striker Dominic Calvert-Lewin. That's how close it was. But I completely understand why he's added Ivan Toney to the roster. He's talked about players being specialists in their position, and in Ivan Toney you get a specialist penalty taker, which in knockout football is absolutely vital. Not just that, he can play up front with Harry Kane, which we don't necessarily see Ollie Watkins, the third striker chosen in this 26, doing. So I think that's really important as well. And he plies his trade in Saudi Arabia, so he's already playing in temperatures over 30 degrees. So he's acclimatised already, and that's certainly something that the rest of the England players are going to struggle to get up to speed with very quickly.
Talk to me, Faye, about Harry Kane, because, I guess if we rewind the last couple of competitions, we might have thought, will Harry Kane still be as good as he is currently as he ticks over 30? He's arguably better than he's ever been.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's because of the professional that he is. He always wants more, strives for the best. Everybody, criticises him. They have done his entire career, actually. He's almost had to fight against the odds ever since he was sent out on loan when he was a Tottenham player. He was sent all around the country and he just kept getting better and better, practising all the time, model professional. And then he's gone out, left Tottenham, gone to the Bundesliga and broken so many records out there for Bayern Munich. He is an incredible, mentally resilient player and the best person, I believe, to lead England into a World Cup as captain.
So, Faye, look, if we look at the squad that's been picked, who do you think is the most important? I'm not talking about the most famous, but the most important player for the core of the squad, keeping them together under pressure.
Harry Kane, without a shadow of a doubt. I think everybody had their hearts in their mouths in the final that he played for Bayern Munich at the weekend. Everybody just wants to wrap him up in cotton wool now for these two friendly games that they've got against Costa Rica and New Zealand in Florida in the next couple of weeks before they head to Kansas for their pre-camp. He is a leader on and off the pitch. He's the talisman in so many ways. He's an incredible performer, and he is the leader in terms of the younger players on the pitch and setting the standards within the group as well. But there are a core number of those players. We know the importance of Jude Bellingham and how he can turn a game on its head. But then there are other players in the side that, perhaps many England fans are actually unhappy that they're on the plane, they have their ticket, as Thomas Tuchel explains it, and Jordan Henderson is one of those. But do not underestimate the importance of Jordan Henderson behind the scenes, not just the fact that, you know, he is a Premier League player, he plays for Brentford, and he's a brilliant leader on the pitch and can calm everybody down, but also behind the scenes he set the standards, and you know, he was much missed in Germany in 2024 during the European Championship campaign. So players like that have been there and done it before are vital for England going forward, because it's a collective. Thomas Tuchel describes it as a brotherhood, and building that unity when they're going to be potentially together if they get to the final for 7 weeks is really important.
Faith, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
OK, let's take a look at the latest weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the weather will cool off towards the end of the week, despite temperatures remaining a little above average. After a record-breaking bank holiday weekend, the intense heat will continue in the south today, but should begin to ease elsewhere. It's a dry and sunny start across the entire country. Temperatures in the south will already be in the late teens, early 20 Celsius, and will respond rapidly to early sunshine. Scotland and Northern Ireland will also be bright or sunny, but significantly cooler, and parts of England and Wales will become very warm again, with temperatures heading back to 33 or 34 Celsius. Scotland, Ireland and eastern England will see their fair share of sunshine, but will have temperatures closer to average for the time of year.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, walking along the wing of a plane at 99 years old. We'll speak to the oldest wing walker in the world next.
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
Are these immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Welcome back. Now, for those who have a fear of flying, look away, because our next guest certainly doesn't have that problem. Harry Heisman is the world's oldest wing walker at 99 years old.
Wow, and I'm really pleased to say that Harry joins us now to tell us all about it. Sir, we bow down to you today and your heroics. Just talk us through why you decided to do it in the first place.
Why did I decide? I think it was decided for me a long while ago when I was a child, or when I was, say, 10 or 12. I used to go to the cinema and I could see these news programs, and it showed you what they called the American flying circus. And there were people doing all sorts of things in little aircraft. And one of them was people, mainly girls, used to be on top of this wing of a double wing aircraft. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm going to do that one day. It's taken me a long while, but I got there in the end, and it was something that's been worth waiting 90 years for.
Wait, sorry, so this was the first time you've ever done it?
Yes.
Wow. I hadn't realised that. I assumed you were a sort of long-standing expert returning to do it to break the record, but I hadn't realised you were first. So was it terrifying?
Pardon?
Was it scary?
It's something, I can't describe it, because it's something you don't expect to be doing, for one thing. And being up there, you feel on your own, and then all of a sudden you're 1,000 feet in the air. And I was so busy looking around at the view, and I was trying to wave to the friends we had down below. And I was sitting there for them, waiting for them to take off. We had a lovely pilot, and I was sat there and I thought, well, any minute now we're going to take off. And I sat there, and suddenly I realised I was 1,000 feet in the air, and we'd already taken off. And it was wonderful.
Harry, Harry, this was a really important... I'm so sorry. What I want to get in here, because we're squeezed for time, is that you did this in memory of your wife and your dear son who passed away from cancer. What do you think they would have made of your heroics on Saturday?
My wife passed away through cancer. My son passed away at 32 years of age from cancer, and this is why I decided to do the wing walking in aid of cancer, because that is a scourge of the universe at the moment. We need to get to grips with it and see it's worse for children. That's why I'm doing a children's program. But it's so much worse because they can't tell you how they feel, and they deserve every penny and every help that we can do. When you see them in hospitals, they have a great big smile, and you think, well, how can a child have to go through cancer when all they want to do is enjoy their young life. So I'm hoping that something's going to come of this. With your help, perhaps it will do.
Well done for doing it and for raising money for Lennox Children's Cancer Fund, as indeed you have done. And congrats, and thanks so much for joining us, Harry.
Oh, thanks so much, Harry. Thank you. Oh, it puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
It certainly does. No, very, very noble of him, and yeah, unbelievably impressive as well to do that. The very first time, aged 99. We wanted to get in another bank holiday story as well before we leave you. The annual famous cheese roll.
Yeah, it happened yesterday. I have to say, you know, for me, it's a massive health risk here. My kids do it at any opportunity that they can if they see
Not this one.
Not this one in particular, but any kind of grass hill. They're doing this type of thing. So it's happening up and down the country. Kids love it.
If you saw that the same person's won it now for the third time, the German
Why do they do
YouTuber.
it?
I don't know. It's not for me, I must say. But there we go. That was yesterday. Of course, a lot of people enjoying the great weather, which is expected to continue. Well, after the break, we're going to have much more on Sky News today, including on the news, of course, that some military exchanges have begun again in the Middle East, which has pushed oil price back up a little bit, $99 a barrel now on Brent, highlighting that tensions remain despite positive tunes over the last few days. We'll be right back.